but I think they're very close to it. I mean, the two pillars of sovereignty are monetary sovereignty and military sovereignty. Well, they're racing right now to get rid of American monetary sovereignty. And, of course, whether the military is really sovereign or not is up for debate, too. But it's certainly no debate.
Stay there. Let's come back and talk about it and to transfer all our laws over to the UN and regional governorships. G. Edward Griffin, one of those evil people, straight ahead. Okay, going back to G. Edward Griffin. G. Edward, when I was doing my David Rockefeller imitations, I was interrupting you. So you were talking about solutions to kick out the parasites. I think, number one, my job is to expose them for the criminal parasites they are. The citizens need to do that to awaken more. But with the awakened mass we have to start moving into the power centers to reinfuse the Bill of Rights, Constitution, and rugged individualism. Please continue.
Well, that pretty well sums it. All I can do is cover the same ground, Alex. It's the fact of the matter is that humans have this instinct to follow and to cluster into groups and follow leaders, and we have this herd instinct. There's no denying it, and so we tend to follow the opinion leaders of our country, or the political leaders of our country. Before we make up our minds, we say, well, what did they say about this on the news? You know, that sort of thing. It's silly, but everybody has that instinct. And so our opponents have figured that out long ago, and they decided, okay, we'll just be the leadership of all of these power centers and opinion-forming groups. And then 1% or less of us can control the other 99%. No problem. And they're right. That's the way it's always done. But they have perfected it. I mean, they've made a real science out of it here in this country. And so the solution is not just to say, my goodness, what are we going to do? The solution is to reverse that process. We have to go into those areas of influence and become the new leaders and replace the old leaders. That's all there is to it. There is no other solution. The idea that, well, if we can just find one man like a Ron Paul or somebody else, and put him in the White House, that'll take care of everything. Well, that's nonsense. One man, first of all, is not going to get elected if you've got all of the media against him and the educational system against him and all the unions against him, you know, and everybody's against him. These organizations, I should say, maybe the people would be for him, but the people would be convinced that he doesn't stand a chance because of what the media says, and so forth. So you could never get the man elected into the White House in the first place without having some influence of these other power centers. But even if you did take that example for just a hypothetical example, he wouldn't be able to do anything because he'd be blocked on every side by.
And by the way, Ron Paul has said that. He said he's just a focal point of education to run other Campaign for Liberty type people at the state and federal level, and that it's all part of a process, and that it's the power of the people that is going to do this.
Yes, and then you take it one step further and say that even even if he were not blocked and that he could do great and wonderful things, he wouldn't, because the kind of guy we're talking about would want to follow the Constitution, and the Constitution says that the president doesn't do anything except follow the orders of Congress.
And that's what he has said. That's that's the problem. That's
exactly the problem. And so we say, well, let's put a man on a white horse in charge and just let him be a dictator for us. No. It doesn't work that way, or we don't want it to work that way. So we're back to the drawing boards, which is the only way to solve this problem, in my view, is to ride the wave of this mass educational awareness that you and I and others are trying to create, and then out of the mass numbers that come forth, there will be maybe 1% of those people who will say, by golly, I'm going to go into politics, or I'm going to stand up at my union meetings, or I'm going to become influential here and there. I'm going to be part of the new leadership. And that is when things finally begin to happen. And that's going to take a little time, but it's a proven formula, and we know it'll work. And I'm happy to say that right now I'm convinced it is going to work.
Continue.
Well, how do I think it's going to work? I see it already happening. We get letters all the time and emails and phone calls from people who say, you know, we've decided to follow your advice. We ran for city council 6 months ago, and lo and behold, we won. And somebody will say, well, I've decided this year I'm going to declare my candidacy in the congressional seat in my district. Yes, it's held right now by a very staunch, well-known political figure, but nobody really likes him. It's just that nobody has a choice, so we're going to offer a choice. Well, this is just the beginning of that kind of a thing. Once every year, we have thousands of people making that kind of a decision, and if they have the smarts of being able to organize a well-run, well-thought-out, and well-funded political campaign, once that starts to happen, and it is starting to happen now, but once this wave becomes large enough, I think that's the point. It's the tipping point, but we can restore the republic.
And let's be clear about this. We lost 9 out of 10 conservatively of the battles against the British during that 7-year war, but it was the perseverance, and with a few little victories like Trenton, then that began the shift of momentum as people began to realize they did have power. They could win. So take a Deborah Medina. She runs for governor, gets 19 percentage points out of nowhere. That spurred masses of other people to start running in their states. So we may not win every time, but we're out there getting the message out. Just like Ron Paul didn't win in 2008, but it got the real issues out there about the inflation tax, the wars, that conservatives don't have to be warmongers. He won the CPAC straw poll. But the bigger issue is once we support patriot candidates, and if they start flip-flopping, you got to drop them immediately. There has to be a code that we don't just run and then start getting some power and flip-flop. If that happens, you got to drop somebody. You got to go with people that are steadfast and have proven that they won't waffle, that they won't give in. But take the global warming hoax. It's completely collapsing. The masses are waking up to it. The establishment doesn't care, though. They say they're going ahead with it. But so that fight will continue. But we're seeing that we're gaining momentum. We're getting purchase. We're getting a toehold. We're having successes. The flu was exposed as a fraud. Record numbers of people said no. The Wall Street Journal reported the lowest level ever for both seasonal and the swine flu shot. And lo and behold, less flu, because we know the flu shot's giving people the flu. Many studies show. We're seeing victories against, so far, the health care bill. It's completely unpopular. The Democrats are destroying themselves if they pass it. But the point is, we do see the momentum really shifting.
Well, yes, I'm glad you brought that up, because although I think we all can take great encouragement from that, there's an area involved in that issue that is generally being ignored, and it scares the heck out of me, which is that under these conditions, it is extremely easy for someone from the other side to provide false leadership. I can tell you that, well, what's an example? The Federal Reserve System, by which I know a little, it was actually sold to the American people, not entirely, but partially, because the very people who drafted the Federal Reserve pretended that it was that they were opposed to it. In other words, they led their own opposition to make sure that the opposition would fail. And
who is that today? It's Glenn Beck, Sarah Palin. I mean, clearly they're the Judas Iscariots.
Exactly. I would certainly say that's an easy choice. But they're out there. And some of them, I'm sure that there are some of them that could come on your radio show and agree with everything you say and agree with everything I say and say a few other good things, and yet they could be just planning to get elected, so that people would say, we got a good man elected, and yet they won't do anything. They'll buckle, as you say. And that points to the fact that when we say that they're going to buckle or they're going to switch, it's because we've never asked these candidates what they really believe. We've seen what they said. We've heard what they said. We said, well, they're against the swine flu charade. They want to get us out of the war in the Middle East and so forth. Well, heck, Obama said that. But, what they say is not important. It's what they do. And nobody's asking these candidates, what do they believe? What are their principles? What's their ideology? And that's where I come into the fore, because, as you know, with Freedom Force, we're totally focused on ideology. We have a creed of freedom, and we want our candidates who are going into office to say, yes, this is my creed. I believe this. These are not issues. These are principles, I believe, that the individual is more important than the group, and that the individual must not be sacrificed in the name of the group. That's a firm principle, you know. And we believe that all laws should apply to all groups of people equally, not any exceptions. None. Zilch. Nuda. Nunca. You know, this is a principle. Well, anybody that says, yes, I believe that, would have to vote against all of this nonsense. Progressive income tax, for example. Does that treat all groups equally? No. It starts out from the very beginning to treat those who are making more money in a different class than those who are making less money. And those who have got certain political connections can get exemptions that other people cannot. If you're married and you've got 25 kids, you don't have to pay any tax. Whereas if you're not married and you have 25 kids, you do pay tax and so forth. This doesn't treat everybody the same.